2, 3, 5.
Welcome everyone to Discover This. Well, how many of you went and saw the Rolling Stones in 1972? Well, today we're going to talk about that tour. And if you recall, the Rolling Stones tour in 1972 was their first tour of the United States, well, North America really, because they played in Canada too, since 1969. And if you recall, that 1969 tour ended at Altamont. The Rolling Stones curated and hosted free all-day concert up at the Altamont Raceway in Northern California. That's the one where the Rolling Stones hired the Hells Angels to provide security, and where the Hells Angels killed a young man right in front of the stage as the Rolling Stones played. So 1972 was the first tour in 3 years, and they were back in the United States, and we're going to kind of tell you how it went. So rehearsals for the tour started in Switzerland, and they picked Switzerland because Keith Richards had been in Switzerland trying to detox from heroin. So as he was finishing up with that, the rest of the band and the crew and everything got loaded into Switzerland, and they started rehearsals for this tour. And then towards the end of May 1972, the band and everybody packed up and moved everything to Los Angeles, and they finished rehearsals at the Warner Brothers studio in Burbank, California. So the tour kicked off in Vancouver, British Columbia on June 3rd, 1972. Now, Stevie Wonder opened each night of this tour. Some other shows had somebody before Stevie Wonder, but Stevie Wonder opened every show. And this Vancouver show was sold out, but that didn't stop about 2,500 fans without tickets from showing up outside the Pacific Coliseum. They had knives, clubs, explosives, and they tried to force their way into the arena. They were met with what ended up being about 285 police. The crowd outside started throwing rocks, bottles, and Molotov cocktails. 31 police officers were hurt, with 8 being taken to the hospital with broken ribs, concussions, broken wrists, etc. 13 people were arrested with charges ranging from assaulting a police officer to possessing explosives. 4 police vehicles were damaged, 2 were burned from Molotov cocktails, and 2 had their windows blown out. And that was just night 1. So the Rolling Stones tour headed south through Seattle, San Francisco, and then they got to Southern California. And you can see from this flyer here, they played a few shows in Southern California. Started at the Palladium in Hollywood, then went to the Long Beach Arena, and then they played the Forum, which they ended up adding a second show there, so they played 2 shows in 1 day at the Forum. And then they came here to San Diego at the sports arena right behind me. And that's where the excrement hit the rotating oscillator, as it were.
The tickets for the one-time-only San Diego Stones concert were pre-sold, but the seating is on a first-come, first-served basis, and music fans have been lining up for the tickets since early morning.
We got here last night.
What time?
Oh, it was about 11 o'clock last night.
Is it worth it?
It's very worth it.
Why?
Why? It's the Rolling Stones. I've never seen them in my life, and it may be the last time, so I'm here.
Got here at 7 o'clock last night. Last night, 7 o'clock.
What have you been doing all that time?
Getting stoned.
What time did you arrive?
Last night.
What time?
I don't know. About 11. About 11.
Have you ever seen the Rolling Stones before?
Yes, I have. One time in Altamont.
And why are you going to see them again?
Because I didn't see them from last time.
What time did you arrive?
This morning. Really early.
How early?
About 10.
Why?
Why? Because I like good seats. I want to see them really close.
So San Diego was again a sold-out show. And part of the issue here in San Diego was that counterfeit tickets had been sold. And some 500 or so fans tried getting into the sports arena here with those counterfeit tickets. When they were turned away, it started to get violent. As police were called, the crowd started throwing rocks and bottles, and eventually they threw Molotov cocktails. The crowd was declared an unlawful assembly, and police tried moving the crowd towards Sports Arena Boulevard. And they actually gathered up here at the west entrance, and the police lined up and they started forcing the crowd this way towards Sports Arena Boulevard, right down there. And the crowd were still throwing objects at the police and police vehicles, and at cars here in the parking lot, and at cars on Sports Arena Boulevard right there. Now in the end, 15 people were injured, 9 of them police officers, and 60 people were arrested. More than 50 cars were damaged. Many of the cars were fans that were inside the arena watching the Rolling Stones perform. The crowd threw rocks at the passing cars on Sports Arena Boulevard, and across the street from the sports arena at the time, there was no Home Depot or Target. There was a vacant lot, a few smaller businesses, but in the vacant lot, people threw some Molotov cocktails and started a brush fire. So a lot going on here. Now, for those of you that know your San Diego history and people in San Diego, the person in charge of the San Diego Police Department response to this riot here was a guy by the name of William Collender. He was an inspector at the time, which I don't believe they have that position anymore, but Bill Collender would go on to become police chief of the San Diego Police Department and later sheriff of San Diego County. So the next night, the Rolling Stones played in Tucson, Arizona for the first time ever. Another sold-out show with about 9,500 fans inside. Once they were inside, the staff at the venue started closing the doors, and that's when about 300 Utes started trying to push their way into the center. They played at the Tucson Convention Center that night. They started throwing cans and bottles and rocks, shattering some of the windows. Police dispersed the crowd with tear gas, and 2 people were arrested. So the violence wasn't isolated to the crowds. You see, 2 nights later in Denver, after the show, Stephen Stills showed up at the Rolling Stones Hotel. And while gabbing with Keith Richards, some disagreement occurred, and both Stephen Stills and Keith Richards pulled knives on each other before being separated. So arrests were commonplace. 81 people were arrested in Houston, mostly for drug offenses. And 61 people were arrested in Washington, D.C. on July 4th for pretty much the same type of thing. Now on July 16th in Montreal, Canada, the Rolling Stones equipment truck arrived the day before the scheduled concert. And around 3 a.m. on July 17th, the day of the show, a bomb went off underneath the loading ramp where the truck was parked. The explosion damaged 30 speakers and blew out windows in apartments across the street. The Rolling Stones went on 45 minutes late without their damaged equipment. About 500 counterfeit tickets had been sold for this show, and after being refused entry, some rocks and bottles were thrown before police could move the crowd along. Now, the Rolling Stones' private jet was forced to land in Rhode Island because of bad weather. The Stones were headed to Boston for a show that night, and while waiting in Rhode Island, Keith Richards was arrested for supposedly assaulting a press photographer. And when Keith was arrested, Mick Jagger complained about the arrest, and he was arrested too. They were both hauled off to jail, but fearing a riot from the 20,000 fans that were waiting for the Rolling Stones in Boston, Boston's mayor intervened, and Warwick, Rhode Island police were persuaded to release Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, and their motorcade received an escort to Boston. The tour ended in New York City with 4 shows over 3 nights at Madison Square Garden. Night 1 saw about 10 arrests and 2 policemen injured, and the last night had a confrontation between police and crowds outside waiting to get in. Now, this 1972 tour was officially called the American Tour 1972, but it has become known as the Stones Touring Party, or STP, based on the laminates that were handed out to crew and family, friends, the media, that kind of thing. The 1972 tour grossed about $4 million, which is around 30 million in today's dollars. And there's been a few books, a number of articles, and a couple documentaries, or at least video clips, have shown up in documentaries about this tour. So that's going to do it, ladies and gentlemen, for this little recap of the Rolling Stones 1972 tour. I want to thank Mike for the suggestion about doing this. And I know a number of you have reached out and sent some suggestions for different topics on different subjects and things like that. And trust me, I'm looking into them. I'm doing some research, and I do get around to filming some of them, or as I do, but sometimes life gets in the way and I don't get to film when I want to film always, but they are getting done, so just hold tight. Got lots more coming on music and Old West and military history and things like that. So I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you taking the time, and we will catch you on the next one.